William and Kate arrive at the Abbey with their children, a heartfelt royal moment in the quiet moments before dawn breaks over London. While the city still sleeps, there exists a family that carries the weight of 1,000 years of history on their shoulders. They wake up not just as parents, but as symbols of an entire nation's hopes and dreams. Today, like every day, they must balance being loving parents with being public figures watched by millions around the world. This is the story of a moment that seemed ordinary but became extraordinary. A story of a family walking together toward their destiny, their children's small hands holding on to tradition while stepping boldly into the future. It's about the quiet conversations in royal cars, the nervous excitement of young hearts, and the profound responsibility of raising the next generation of monarchs. What happens when the most watched family in the world arrives at one of the most sacred places on earth? What do they whisper to each other when the cameras can't hear? How do they prepare their children for moments that will be remembered forever? This is their story, told through the eyes of those who witnessed it, lived it, and were forever changed by it. The morning sun cast long shadows across Kensington Palace as Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood before her bedroom mirror, carefully adjusting the delicate pearl earrings that had once belonged to Princess Diana. Her hands trembled slightly, not from nervousness about the public appearance ahead, but from the weight of the moment she was about to share with her children. Today would be different from all the other royal engagements they had attended together. William appeared in the doorway, his naval uniform pressed to perfection, but his expression carrying the same mixture of pride and protective concern that Catherine had come to recognize whenever their family was preparing for a significant public moment. He had been awake since 4 in the morning, reviewing the schedule with their private secretary, ensuring every detail had been considered for their children's comfort and safety. "Are they ready?" Catherine asked, though she could already hear the excited chatter of Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis echoing from the nursery down the hall. Their youngest, Louis, had been practicing his walking pace for days, determined not to trip on the ancient stones of Westminster Abbey as they had done during a private rehearsal the week before. The family breakfast that morning was unusually quiet, each family member lost in their own thoughts about the day ahead. George, now old enough to understand the significance of royal duties, carefully ate his porridge while mentally rehearsing the proper way to greet the Archbishop. Charlotte, ever the perfectionist, had insisted on practicing her curtsy one final time before they left the palace. William watched his children with a mixture of admiration and concern. He remembered his own first major royal appearances, the overwhelming sensation of hundreds of eyes watching his every move, the weight of representing not just his family, but his entire country. He had made a promise to himself and to Catherine that their children would be prepared differently, that they would understand both the honor and the responsibility of their roles without losing their childhood innocence. The conversation in their private sitting room before departure revealed the careful balance William and Catherine had struck in raising their children. They spoke to them not just about protocol and proper behavior, but about the deeper meaning of service, about the people who would be watching, and why their presence mattered to the nation. "Today, we're not just going to church," William explained to his children as they gathered around him. "We're going to a place where your great-grandmother was crowned, where your grandfather will one day be crowned, and where, someday far in the future, our family will continue to serve the people of Britain." Catherine knelt down to Charlotte's level, gently smoothing her daughter's hair. "Remember what we talked about, darling. Today is about showing respect and love, just like we do at home, but with many more people watching." Charlotte nodded solemnly, her small hand reaching for her mother's for reassurance. The palace staff had been preparing for this moment for weeks. The head of security had coordinated with Westminster Abbey officials to ensure the safest possible route for the family. The communications team had briefed the press about appropriate photography guidelines, especially regarding the children. Every detail had been considered, from the timing of their arrival to the specific seats where the family would sit. As their official car was prepared in the palace courtyard, William reflected on how different this moment was from his own childhood experiences with royal duties. His parents had often been formal and distant during public appearances, following strict protocol that left little room for the natural affection between family members. William and Catherine had decided early in their marriage that their approach would be different. The children's excitement was palpable as they climbed into the official vehicle. Louis pressed his face against the window, watching the familiar sights of London pass by. George sat quietly beside his father, occasionally asking questions about the historical significance of the buildings they passed. Charlotte remained close to her mother, still holding Catherine's hand, drawing comfort from the physical connection. Their route to Westminster Abbey took them through some of London's most historic neighborhoods. William pointed out landmarks to his children, explaining the stories behind the buildings and monuments. This impromptu history lesson served a dual purpose, keeping the children engaged while also helping them understand their connection to British history and culture. The security preparations for their arrival had been extensive. Police officers lined the streets, and barriers had been erected to manage the crowds that had gathered despite the early hour. The media presence was significant, with photographers and camera crews from around the world positioned to capture every moment of the royal family's arrival. As they approached Westminster Abbey, the children could see the massive Gothic structure rising before them, its twin towers reaching toward the cloudy London sky. The Abbey had been the site of royal coronations for nearly 1,000 years, and its ancient stones had witnessed some of the most important moments in British history. Catherine felt a familiar flutter of anxiety as they neared their destination. Despite years of public appearances, she still experienced nervous excitement before major events, particularly when her children were involved. She had learned to channel this energy into focus, ensuring she remained calm and composed for her family's sake. William instructed the children on the final details as their car slowed. "Remember to walk slowly, stay close to Mummy and me, and smile at the people who have come to see us. They've been waiting a long time, and your presence means a great deal to them." The car came to a gentle stop at the Abbey's entrance. Through the windows, they could see the crowd of well-wishers, the flash of cameras, and the ceremonial guards standing at attention. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the transition from private family to public representatives of the British monarchy. William stepped out first, his military bearing evident as he straightened his uniform and surveyed the scene. He then turned to help Catherine from the car, offering his hand with the same gallant gesture he had used on their wedding day years earlier. The crowd's cheers grew louder as the Princess of Wales emerged, her elegant outfit and warm smile immediately capturing the attention of everyone present. One by one, the children were helped from the car. George emerged first, his young face serious but confident as he took in the scene around him. Charlotte followed, her small hand immediately seeking her mother's for reassurance. Finally, Louis bounded out with characteristic energy, his excitement overcoming any nervousness about the crowd and cameras. The family stood together for a moment at the entrance to Westminster Abbey, William and Catherine flanking their 3 children. The image they presented was one of unity, tradition, and hope for the future. The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming, with cheers and applause echoing off the ancient stones of the Abbey. Catherine leaned down to whisper something to Charlotte, who smiled and nodded in response. William placed a protective hand on George's shoulder, guiding him toward the Abbey's entrance. Louis, despite his youth, seemed to instinctively understand the solemnity of the moment and fell into step beside his siblings. As they approached the massive wooden doors of Westminster Abbey, each member of the family carried with them the weight of history, the love of their people, and the hope of a nation. The ancient building stood ready to welcome them, just as it had welcomed generations of their family before them, into a moment that would be remembered and cherished by people around the world. The sound of their footsteps echoed against the stone as they crossed the threshold, leaving the cheering crowd behind, and entering into the sacred space where so much of their family's history had been written. Inside the Abbey, a different kind of anticipation waited, along with hundreds of guests who had gathered to witness this special moment in the life of the royal family. This was more than just an arrival at a church service. It was a continuation of a story that began centuries ago, a story that would continue long after this day was just a memory. As the heavy doors closed behind them, the Wales family stepped forward into their destiny, together as they had always been, ready to serve their people with dignity, grace, and love. The interior of Westminster Abbey enveloped the Wales family in a hush that seemed to absorb even their careful footsteps on the ancient stone floor. The soaring Gothic arches stretched above them like stone prayers reaching toward heaven, while shafts of colored light filtered through stained glass windows that had witnessed nearly a millennium of British history. Catherine felt Louis's small hand slip into hers as they walked deeper into the sacred space, his earlier excitement tempered by the profound atmosphere surrounding them. William guided his family down the nave with the confidence of someone who had walked these aisles many times before, yet today felt different. This wasn't just another royal obligation or ceremonial duty. Today, he was introducing his children to a space that held the deepest connections to their heritage, where their great-great-grandmother Queen Elizabeth II had been crowned, where he himself would one day participate in the most solemn ceremony of his life. The Abbey's interior revealed itself gradually as they proceeded toward their seats. Ancient tombs of kings and queens lined the walls, silent sentinels of history whose marble faces had gazed upon centuries of royal ceremonies. George walked with measured steps beside his father, his eyes taking in the elaborate memorial sculptures and heraldic banners that decorated every surface. His young mind was processing not just the visual grandeur, but beginning to understand his own place in this long line of British monarchs. Charlotte maintained her composure with remarkable grace for a child of her age, though Catherine could feel the slight tension in her daughter's posture. The Princess of Wales remembered her own first experiences in Westminster Abbey, the overwhelming sense of stepping into a living museum where every stone held stories of triumph, tragedy, and transformation. She squeezed Charlotte's hand gently, offering silent reassurance. The congregation was already assembled, rising respectfully as the royal family made their entrance. Distinguished guests filled the carved wooden pews, including members of Parliament, foreign dignitaries, religious leaders, and representatives from various charitable organizations that the family supported. Their faces reflected a mixture of formal respect and genuine warmth as they watched the young princes and princess navigate this significant moment with such dignity. Archbishop of Canterbury stood near the altar, his ceremonial robes adding to the solemnity of the occasion. He had baptized all three of the Wales children in private ceremonies, and seeing them now in this grand setting filled him with a profound sense of continuity. The Church of England had been intertwined with the British monarchy for centuries, and these children represented the future of that sacred relationship. As the family took their designated seats in the front pew, an area that had been specifically prepared for their comfort and security, Louis fidgeted slightly before settling between his parents. The wooden pew, worn smooth by centuries of use, had supported countless members of the royal family during moments of celebration, mourning, and spiritual reflection. William placed a gentle hand on his youngest son's knee, a subtle reminder of proper decorum. The service began with the deep, resonant tones of the Abbey's magnificent organ filling the vast space. The instrument, with its thousands of pipes, created a sound that seemed to emerge from the very stones themselves. Charlotte's eyes widened at the power of the music, while George appeared to listen with the focused attention he brought to all new experiences. Catherine observed her children's reactions with the careful attention of a mother who understood that this experience would become part of their foundational memories. She remembered child psychologists explaining how significant experiences in historic settings could shape a young person's sense of identity and purpose. Today wasn't just about religious observance. It was about helping her children understand their connection to something larger than themselves. The lessons and prayers took on special meaning in this setting. When the congregation recited ancient words that had been spoken in this same space for hundreds of years, the Wales family joined their voices with generations of their ancestors. Louis stumbled over some of the more complex phrases, but William and Catherine encouraged him with gentle smiles rather than corrections. During the service, several readings touched on themes of service, duty, and stewardship. William found himself reflecting on how these concepts would shape his children's lives in ways that most families never experienced. The privilege of their position came with responsibilities that would influence every major decision they made, every relationship they formed, every path they chose to follow. A particularly moving moment came when the choir, composed of boys and men whose voices had graced this space for centuries, performed a hymn that Queen Elizabeth II had specifically requested for family occasions. The pure, ethereal sound seemed to lift the very air around them, and Catherine noticed tears in the eyes of several elderly guests who remembered the late Queen's deep faith and dedication to duty. Princess Charlotte whispered something to her mother during a quiet moment in the service. Catherine leaned down to listen, then smiled and nodded, whispering back a response that seemed to satisfy her daughter's curiosity. These small exchanges between mother and child, observed by millions through carefully positioned cameras, revealed the human side of a family that often seemed to exist in a realm apart from ordinary experience. The sermon delivered by the Archbishop focused on the parable of the talents, discussing how gifts and privileges should be used in service of others. While the message was intended for the entire congregation, William and Catherine couldn't help but reflect on its particular relevance to their children's future. Each of them would inherit not just titles and wealth, but the expectation to use their positions to benefit their fellow citizens. George listened to the sermon with an intensity that surprised his parents. At his young age, he was already beginning to grapple with questions about his future role, asking thoughtful questions about the responsibilities of kingship and the meaning of constitutional monarchy. His parents had been careful to answer these questions honestly, while ensuring he maintained his childhood innocence and joy. As the service progressed, the family participated in communion, a moment of particular significance given the Church of England's role in British constitutional history. The Archbishop had worked closely with William and Catherine to ensure the children understood the spiritual meaning of this participation, not just its ceremonial importance. The ancient ritual of communion in Westminster Abbey connected the Wales family to centuries of British monarchs who had sought spiritual guidance and strength in this sacred space. From Henry VIII, who had separated the Church of England from Rome, to Elizabeth I, who had established the religious settlement that still governed the nation, to the current King Charles III, who would one day be crowned in this very building. Lewis's behavior throughout the lengthy service impressed many observers. Despite his young age, he remained attentive and respectful, occasionally whispering questions to his parents, but generally maintaining the composure expected of a member of the royal family. His natural energy was carefully contained, showing the results of patient instruction from his parents and nanny. The music throughout the service showcased Westminster Abbey's renowned musical tradition. The choir's performance included pieces specifically chosen to reflect themes of family, service, and continuity. Some selections dated back to the Tudor period, while others were more contemporary compositions that spoke to modern understanding of faith and duty. During the final hymn, as hundreds of voices joined together in Westminster Abbey, the Wales family stood with their fellow worshippers in a moment of unified expression. The sound rose to the vaulted ceiling and seemed to encompass not just the people present, but the spirit of all those who had worshipped in this space throughout the centuries. Catherine watched her children sing along with varying degrees of confidence and accuracy, their young voices adding to the chorus of praise. She thought about all the royal children who had stood in similar circumstances throughout British history, learning to balance personal faith with public duty, individual desires with national service. As the service neared its conclusion, William reflected on the weight of tradition that surrounded his family. Every gesture, every word, every moment of this experience was being observed and recorded for posterity. Yet within that formality, he was determined to preserve the authentic relationships and genuine love that bound his family together. The final blessing pronounced by the Archbishop seemed to settle over the congregation like a benediction not just for the service, but for the royal family's continued journey of service. As the organ began the recessional music, the Wales family prepared to process out of Westminster Abbey, carrying with them the prayers and hopes of all who had witnessed this sacred moment. Their time in this holy space was drawing to a close, but the impact of these minutes would resonate in their children's memories for decades to come. As they prepared to leave the sanctuary and return to the world of crowds and cameras waiting outside, each member of the family carried something different from what they had brought in. They had been touched by history, blessed by tradition, and prepared for whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead on their remarkable journey of royal service. As the final notes of the recessional hymn echoed through Westminster Abbey's ancient stone corridors, the Wales family began their slow procession toward the great west doors. The weight of history seemed to follow them with each step, while ahead lay the bright London afternoon and thousands of people eager to catch a glimpse of the future of the British monarchy. William walked with his characteristic measured pace, his military training evident in his bearing, while Catherine moved with the natural grace that had made her beloved by people around the world. The children had adapted remarkably well to the lengthy service, but Catherine could sense their growing excitement as they approached the exit. Lewis had been particularly patient, though she noticed him glancing toward the doors with increasing frequency. Charlotte maintained her composed demeanor, but her grip on her mother's hand had tightened slightly as the sound of the waiting crowd grew louder. George walked beside his father with the serious expression he wore during official duties, already beginning to understand that the next few minutes would require his full attention. Behind them, the distinguished guests began to file out in order of precedence, a ritual as old as the monarchy itself. Foreign ambassadors, government ministers, military leaders, and religious figures created a procession that represented the complex web of relationships that supported the constitutional monarchy. Many of these individuals had known William and Catherine for years, watching their family grow from the early days of their marriage to this moment when their children were becoming public figures in their own right. The Archbishop of Canterbury walked alongside senior clergy, his ceremonial robes rustling softly against the stone floor. He had performed many significant ceremonies in this sacred space, but family services with the royal children always held special meaning. These young people would one day carry forward the Church of England's traditions, and their spiritual formation in these early years would influence their approach to the complex relationship between faith and public duty that defined the British constitutional system. Palace security officials maintained their discreet but vigilant presence throughout the procession. They had spent weeks coordinating with Abbey officials, metropolitan police, and intelligence services to ensure every aspect of the family's visit proceeded smoothly. The children's safety was paramount, but the security arrangements had been designed to remain as invisible as possible, allowing the family to interact naturally with their surroundings and the people they would soon meet. As they neared the great doors, the sound from outside became more distinct. Thousands of voices created a continuous murmur of excitement and anticipation. The crowd had been gathering since early morning, with many people bringing flowers, small gifts, and handmade signs expressing their affection for the royal family. Veterans, school children, tourists, and local residents had all found places along the barriers, united in their desire to be part of this special moment. William paused just before the threshold, turning to speak quietly with his children. His words were lost in the general movement of the procession, but observers noted his gentle manner and the way each child nodded in response. These final instructions were likely reminders about walking pace, appropriate responses to the crowd, and staying close to their parents during the outdoor portion of their visit. Catherine used this brief pause to make final adjustments to Charlotte's outfit and to ensure Louis's formal attire remained properly arranged. Her motherly attention to these details provided a touching contrast to the grandeur surrounding them, reminding everyone present that beneath the ceremony and protocol, this was fundamentally a family taking care of each other. The moment arrived when the great doors of Westminster Abbey swung open, and London's afternoon light flooded into the ancient nave. The sound of the crowd immediately intensified, a wave of cheers and applause that rolled across the assembled thousands like thunder. Cameras flashed in continuous sequence, creating a strobe effect that momentarily dazzled the family as they stepped from the dim interior into the bright outdoor world. William emerged first, squinting slightly in the sudden brightness before his eyes adjusted. His smile was immediate and genuine as he raised his hand in acknowledgement of the crowd's enthusiasm. The cheers grew even louder at his appearance, with cries of "William" and "Future King" rising above the general celebration. He had experienced crowds of this size many times throughout his life, but the presence of his children always added an extra dimension of meaning to these encounters. Catherine appeared next, and the crowd's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Her elegant outfit, carefully chosen to be both appropriate for the religious service and appealing to the assembled well-wishers, drew appreciative comments from fashion observers in the crowd. But it was her warm smile and natural way of acknowledging the people's presence that created the strongest connection. She had mastered the art of making eye contact with individuals in even the largest crowds, making each person feel personally recognized. Prince George stepped into the sunlight with visible determination, his young face set in an expression of concentrated effort as he processed the scale of the crowd before him. The sight of the future king as a child drew particularly emotional responses from many in the crowd, with elderly visitors remembering similar moments from previous generations of royal children. His wave to the crowd, while somewhat tentative, was met with enthusiastic approval. Princess Charlotte's emergence created an audible wave of appreciation from the crowd. Her natural poise and the confidence with which she handled the attention impressed experienced royal watchers. She seemed to instinctively understand how to balance acknowledgement of the crowd with the dignity expected of her position, offering small waves and smiles that delighted photographers and spectators alike. Prince Louis bounded through the doorway with characteristic energy, his excitement at seeing the massive crowd evident in his expression and body language. His uninhibited enthusiasm drew laughter and cheers from the assembled people, many of whom were charmed by his natural, unguarded responses to the extraordinary situation. His parents watched carefully to ensure his excitement didn't lead to any breach of protocol, but they also seemed to appreciate his genuine joy in the moment. The family stood together on the steps of Westminster Abbey, framed by the Gothic architecture that had witnessed so many historic moments. The image they presented was carefully composed yet natural, formal yet accessible. Photography and videography captured every angle, creating images that would appear in newspapers, magazines, and news broadcasts around the world within hours. Behind them, other members of the congregation began to emerge, but the crowd's attention remained focused entirely on the Wales family. The children seemed to be adapting to the intensity of the attention with remarkable composure, though Catherine remained alert to any signs that the experience might be overwhelming them. Her maternal instincts were clearly engaged even as she maintained her public composure. The security arrangements became more visible now that the family was outdoors, with protection officers positioned at strategic points around the Abbey steps and crowd barriers. Their presence was professional but unobtrusive, allowing the family maximum freedom to interact with well-wishers while maintaining appropriate safety protocols. The Metropolitan Police had closed several streets to traffic, creating a secure perimeter around the entire area. William began to guide his family down the steps toward the crowd barriers, where they would spend several minutes meeting with people who had waited hours for this opportunity. This walkabout portion of their visit had been carefully planned to allow maximum interaction while maintaining security and managing the children's energy levels. Each family member would have opportunities to receive flowers, speak with visitors, and create the personal connections that formed such an important part of modern royal duties. The crowd's excitement intensified as it became clear that the royal family would be approaching the barriers for direct interaction. People pressed forward carefully, mindful of the barriers and security presence, but eager to get as close as possible to the family they had come to see. Children in the crowd waved frantically, hoping to catch the attention of their royal contemporaries, while adults prepared cameras and phones to capture these precious moments. Catherine moved toward one section of the barrier where a group of school children had been positioned with their teachers. Her natural affinity for young people was evident as she knelt to speak with children at their eye level, accepting flowers and small gifts while asking questions about their schools and interests. Her interactions appeared completely natural and unforced, creating the kind of genuine connections that endeared her to people throughout Britain and around the world. William approached a different section where military veterans and their families had gathered. His background in military service created an immediate bond with these visitors, and his conversations with them appeared serious and respectful. Many of these individuals had served during his own time in the armed forces, and their shared experiences created connections that went beyond the formal relationship between monarch and subject. The children's first direct interactions with the crowd were carefully supervised but allowed to develop naturally. George's conversations with other young people in the crowd showed his growing confidence in public settings, while Charlotte's natural warmth and curiosity led to delightful exchanges that charmed observers. Louis's interactions were necessarily briefer given his age, but his genuine pleasure in meeting new people was evident to everyone present. As the walkabout continued, the family members occasionally regrouped, sharing observations and ensuring that everyone remained comfortable with the experience. These brief family conferences, conducted in whispers while surrounded by crowds and cameras, demonstrated their ability to maintain their close relationships even in the most public circumstances. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Abbey grounds as the royal family continued their interactions with the crowd. Each conversation, each smile, each moment of connection contributed to the living relationship between the monarchy and the people it served. This wasn't just ceremony or duty. It was the daily work of building and maintaining the bonds that sustained one of the world's oldest constitutional monarchies. Their time outside Westminster Abbey was creating memories that would last lifetimes, both for the royal family members and for the thousands of people who had gathered to witness this special moment. As they moved along the barriers, accepting gifts and good wishes, they embodied the best traditions of royal service, while also demonstrating how those traditions could evolve and adapt to meet the needs of contemporary Britain. The warmth of genuine human connection radiated through the crowd as the Wales family continued their walkabout around Westminster Abbey. Catherine found herself deeply moved by a conversation with an elderly woman named Margaret, who had traveled from Yorkshire specifically to meet the family. Margaret's weathered hands shook slightly as she presented Catherine with a small bouquet of roses from her own garden, explaining that she had been following the royal family since William's birth and considered them part of her extended family. "Your children are growing up so beautifully," Margaret said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "They remind me of my own grandchildren, except they carry such grace and dignity." Catherine accepted the flowers with genuine gratitude, taking time to ask about Margaret's journey to London and her own family. These moments of authentic connection were what made royal duties meaningful rather than merely ceremonial. Meanwhile, William engaged in a particularly significant conversation with a group of young military personnel who had recently returned from overseas deployment. Their discussion went beyond pleasantries as they shared experiences about military service, leadership challenges, and the transition to civilian life. William's own military background allowed him to speak with authority and empathy about the unique pressures faced by service members and their families. One young soldier, barely older than George, presented William with a small regimental badge that had been carried through multiple deployments. "This has brought good luck to 3 generations of my family in service," he explained. "I'd be honored if Prince George could have it, maybe to remind him that ordinary people are willing to serve something greater than themselves." William accepted the gift with visible emotion, understanding the profound meaning behind the gesture. Prince George's interactions were becoming more confident as the walkabout progressed. He found himself in conversation with a group of schoolchildren from a local primary school who had written letters to the royal family as part of a citizenship project. Their teacher, Mrs. Anderson, had prepared the children for weeks, but nothing could have prepared her for watching her students engage in actual conversation with the future king. "We learned about the monarchy in class," one brave 7-year-old named Jamie told George. "Our teacher said you'll be king someday. Are you scared?" The directness of the question surprised many adults within earshot, but George considered it seriously before responding. "Sometimes I think about it," George replied with remarkable honesty for a child his age. "But my father and mother teach me that being king means helping people and serving the country. That doesn't seem scary when you think about it that way." His response demonstrated the careful instruction he had received about his future role, but also his own developing understanding of public service. Princess Charlotte gravitated toward a group of girl guides who had been waiting patiently with their leaders. The young women, ranging in age from 8 to 16, had prepared a special presentation about their community service projects. Charlotte listened intently as they described their efforts to help elderly residents in their neighborhoods, their environmental conservation work, and their fundraising for local charities. The conversation revealed Charlotte's own developing interests in charitable work and community service. She asked thoughtful questions about their projects and shared some of her own family's charitable activities. "My mother takes me to visit children in hospitals sometimes," she confided to the group. "It makes me happy to see how we can help make people feel better." Prince Louis, despite his young age, was creating some of the most memorable moments of the afternoon. His uninhibited enthusiasm and natural curiosity led to delightful interactions that charmed everyone present. When he spotted a baby in the crowd, he insisted on being lifted up to see better, waving enthusiastically at the infant and drawing laughter from the surrounding adults. His encounter with a therapy dog that had accompanied a disabled veteran became particularly special. Louis immediately asked if he could pet the golden retriever, and, with his parents' permission and the dog's handler's approval, he spent several minutes gently stroking the animal's fur while asking questions about how dogs help people. The veteran, initially nervous about meeting royalty, found himself completely at ease as Louis's genuine interest in his service dog created a natural conversation. The gifts presented to the family throughout the walkabout reflected the creativity and thoughtfulness of people who had traveled from across Britain and beyond. Handmade drawings from children, carefully crafted items from local artisans, flowers from personal gardens, and letters containing heartfelt messages created a treasure trove of personal connections that would be carefully preserved by the palace staff. Catherine received a particularly touching gift from a group of mothers who had lost children to various illnesses. They had created a memory book filled with stories of hope, resilience, and the healing power of community support. The presentation was made by Sarah, a mother who had lost her daughter to childhood cancer but had found purpose in helping other families facing similar challenges. "Your work with children's charities has meant so much to families like ours," Sarah explained through tears. "Knowing that you understand the importance of supporting children and families during difficult times gives us strength." Catherine's own emotional response was evident as she accepted the book and promised to read every story within it. The conversation between William and a group of young entrepreneurs showcased another dimension of modern royal engagement. These business owners, all under 30, had built companies focused on sustainable technology, social innovation, and community development. Their discussion touched on economic policy, environmental challenges, and the role of innovation in addressing societal problems. William's questions demonstrated his genuine interest in understanding how young leaders were approaching complex challenges. The problems we face as a nation require fresh thinking and new approaches, he told the group. Your generation isn't waiting for permission to make changes. You're creating solutions and building the future you want to see. As the afternoon progressed, the children began to show signs of fatigue, though they maintained their composure admirably. Catherine and William monitored their energy levels carefully, knowing that managing public appearances was a skill that would need to be developed gradually over many years. The balance between allowing meaningful interactions and protecting their children's well-being required constant attention. The security team remained vigilant throughout the extended walkabout, but their presence had become so seamlessly integrated into the event that most observers were barely aware of their activities. Their professionalism allowed the family maximum freedom to engage naturally with the crowd while maintaining appropriate safety protocols. Media coverage of the event was extensive, with photographers and camera crews capturing every interaction from multiple angles. However, the focus remained on the human connections being made rather than just the ceremony of the occasion. The images being created would appear in publications around the world, but the lasting impact would be felt most strongly by the individuals who had participated in these personal conversations. As the walkabout neared its conclusion, William and Catherine began the careful process of extracting their family from the crowd while ensuring that as many people as possible felt acknowledged and appreciated. This required diplomatic skill and timing, as disappointment from those who didn't get to meet the family had to be balanced against the practical limitations of time and the children's energy. The final interactions were particularly poignant, as people realized their opportunity to speak with the royal family was coming to an end. Last-minute presentations of flowers, hurried conversations, and final photographs created a bittersweet conclusion to an extraordinary afternoon of personal connection. An elderly gentleman named Robert, a veteran of multiple conflicts who had traveled from Scotland, managed to catch William's attention just as the family was preparing to depart. "Your mother would be proud," he said simply, referring to Princess Diana. "She always said the monarchy's strength came from its connection to ordinary people. You're carrying on that tradition beautifully." William's response was quiet, but deeply felt, understanding the profound meaning behind the comparison. As the family began to move toward their waiting vehicle, they turned back to wave one final time to the crowd that had shared this special afternoon with them. The cheers and applause that followed them seemed to carry the genuine affection and respect that had been built through dozens of individual conversations and personal connections. The children waved enthusiastically, their earlier nervousness completely replaced by evident enjoyment of the experience. Louis blew kisses to the crowd, drawing final bursts of laughter and applause. Charlotte maintained her composed wave while staying close to her mother. George stood tall beside his father, his final wave carrying a dignity that hinted at the king he would someday become. The walkabout had accomplished something remarkable in contemporary royal history. Rather than maintaining distance and formality, the Wales family had created genuine human connections that transcended the traditional barriers between monarchy and subjects. They had shown that royal service could be both dignified and accessible, formal yet warmly human. As they prepared to leave Westminster Abbey behind, each member of the family carried with them the stories, gifts, and memories created during their time with the people they served. These experiences would inform their understanding of their roles and responsibilities, while also providing the human connections that made their service meaningful rather than merely dutiful. The royal vehicle moved slowly through the streets of London as the Wales family began their journey back to Kensington Palace, each member processing the profound experiences of the afternoon in their own way. The partition between the passenger compartment and the driver provided privacy for family conversation, allowing them to decompress from the intensity of the public appearance while the city's familiar landmarks passed by their windows. Louis, exhausted from the excitement and attention, had fallen asleep against his mother's shoulder within minutes of settling into his seat. Catherine gently stroked his hair while reflecting on how naturally he had interacted with strangers, showing no fear or hesitation despite his young age. His ability to bring joy to others seemed instinctive, a gift that would serve him well in his future royal duties. Princess Charlotte sat quietly beside her mother, carefully arranging the small bouquet of flowers she had received from a group of young ballet dancers. The flowers had come with a note expressing hopes that Charlotte might pursue dance, as the girls had heard rumors about her interest in ballet lessons. Charlotte's thoughtful handling of these gifts showed her developing understanding of how public interest in her personal life required careful balance between privacy and accessibility. Prince George remained engaged with the afternoon's conversations, asking his father detailed questions about some of the people they had met. His particular interest in the young soldier who had given him the regimental badge led to a discussion about military service, duty, and the relationship between the monarchy and the armed forces. William answered each question thoughtfully, recognizing these conversations as crucial elements in George's preparation for his future role. "The man who gave me this badge seemed very serious about it," George observed, turning the small military insignia over in his hands. "He said it had been in his family for 3 generations. Why would he want to give it to me?" The question revealed George's growing awareness that his position carried responsibilities toward others, not just privileges for himself. William considered his response carefully. "Sometimes people want to share something important with us because they believe we'll understand its value and meaning. That young soldier trusts that you'll remember his family's service and what it represents. He's not just giving you a badge, he's sharing his family's story and their dedication to serving others." Catherine watched this exchange with the satisfaction of a mother seeing her child grapple with complex moral concepts. The education of royal children required constant attention to developing their understanding of service, responsibility, and the weight of public trust. These real-world encounters provided lessons that no classroom instruction could replicate. The conversation in the car revealed how each family member had been affected differently by their interactions with the public. Catherine found herself particularly moved by her conversations with mothers, especially those who had shared personal struggles or celebrated their children's achievements. The common bond of motherhood created connections that transcended the formal relationship between royalty and citizens. There was something special about today, Catherine reflected aloud. People weren't just being polite or following protocol. They were sharing real parts of their lives with us. She thought about Margaret from Yorkshire, whose simple gift of garden roses had carried decades of family history, and about Sarah, whose memory book represented triumph over unimaginable grief. William nodded in agreement, remembering his own most meaningful conversations of the afternoon. "That veteran who gave George the badge served in the same regiment where I trained. When he talked about service and sacrifice, he wasn't speaking theoretically. He was sharing experiences that shaped his entire life." These encounters reminded William why royal duties extended far beyond ceremonial obligations. The children's questions during the car ride revealed their developing social awareness and emotional intelligence. Charlotte wanted to know more about the Girl Guides community projects, expressing interest in participating in similar activities herself. Her questions showed genuine curiosity about how young people could make meaningful contributions to their communities, suggesting a natural inclination toward the charitable work that formed such an important part of royal responsibilities. As their vehicle navigated through London traffic, the family's protection officers maintained discreet communication with palace security to ensure their safe return. The afternoon's events had proceeded flawlessly from a security perspective, but the challenge of protecting royal children during public appearances required constant vigilance and adaptation to unexpected situations. The gifts collected during the walkabout filled several bags in the vehicle's luggage compartment. Palace protocol required that each item be carefully catalogued, with many pieces eventually being displayed in royal collections or donated to appropriate charities. However, some items, particularly those with personal significance like George's military badge and Catherine's memory book, would be retained permanently as meaningful mementos of this special day. William's phone buzzed with messages from palace staff providing updates on media coverage of their visit. Initial reports were overwhelmingly positive, with commentators praising the family's natural interactions and the children's composure during their extended public appearance. International coverage was particularly enthusiastic, with foreign media highlighting the modernization of royal protocol under William and Catherine's leadership. The conversation gradually turned to plans for the evening, a return to normal family routine after the intensity of their public appearance. Louis would need an early dinner and bedtime after his exciting but exhausting day. Charlotte wanted to press the flowers she had received and write thank you notes to some of the people they had met. George expressed interest in researching the military regiment represented by his new badge. Catherine's phone contained dozens of photos taken by her private secretary throughout the day, images that would be reviewed and possibly shared through official royal social media accounts. However, her favorite moments from the afternoon weren't captured in any photograph. They existed in memories of conversations, expressions of genuine emotion, and the gradual confidence she had watched develop in her children throughout the day. As they approached Kensington Palace, the family could see staff members waiting to welcome them home and assist with the transition back to private life. The palace had been their sanctuary throughout their marriage, a place where they could be simply a family without the constant awareness of public observation. Tonight, they would need that private space to process and reflect on the day's experiences. William reflected on how different this homecoming felt from his own childhood experiences with royal duties. His parents' approach had often emphasized the formal aspects of royal service, with less attention to the emotional and personal dimensions of public engagement. William and Catherine had deliberately chosen to prioritize authentic human connections, believing that genuine relationships with citizens strengthened rather than undermined the monarchy's position. The palace gates closed behind them, providing immediate relief from the public attention that had surrounded them all afternoon. Staff members approached the vehicle to assist with luggage and escort the family into their private apartments. The children's energy seemed to revive slightly at being back in familiar surroundings, though the day's excitement had clearly tired them all. Their private apartment within Kensington Palace offered a stark contrast to the grandeur of Westminster Abbey and the intensity of the public crowds. Family photographs, children's artwork, and comfortable furniture created an environment that prioritized warmth and intimacy over formal presentation. This was where the Wales family could simply be themselves, away from cameras and protocol. Dinner that evening was a quiet family affair, with conversation naturally returning to the day's highlights. The children took turns sharing their favorite moments, with Louis enthusiastically describing the therapy dog while Charlotte talked about the Girl Guides projects. George remained focused on his military badge, already planning to learn more about the regiment's history and the young soldier's family background. Catherine and William exchanged glances across the dinner table, understanding without words that today had represented a successful milestone in their children's development as future working royals. The balance they had achieved between maintaining dignity and creating genuine connections offered a model for how the monarchy could remain relevant and beloved in contemporary Britain. As bedtime approached, each child processed the day's experiences in their own way. Louis, overtired from excitement, needed extra comfort and reassurance before settling into sleep. Charlotte arranged her pressed flowers and began drafting thank you notes with her mother's help. George spent time researching military history online, his newfound badge inspiring deeper interest in Britain's armed forces. The day's conclusion brought quiet satisfaction to William and Catherine as they reflected on their family's public debut as working royals. Their children had demonstrated grace, curiosity, and genuine warmth in their interactions with the public, suggesting that the next generation of British royals would successfully carry forward the traditions of service while adapting to contemporary expectations. In the quiet of their private sitting room, after the children had settled into sleep, William and Catherine reviewed the day's events with their senior staff. Media reaction had been overwhelmingly positive, public response enthusiastic, and security arrangements flawless. However, the true measure of success lay not in external validation but in their children's growing understanding of their roles and responsibilities. The afternoon at Westminster Abbey would be remembered as a pivotal moment in the Wales family's public life, marking their children's emergence as confident, compassionate representatives of the British monarchy. The genuine connections formed during their walkabout had strengthened the bonds between the royal family and the people they served, ensuring that the ancient institution of monarchy remained vital and beloved in the modern world. As London settled into evening around Kensington Palace, the Wales family rested in the knowledge that they had successfully balanced their private bond as a loving family with their public responsibilities as symbols of national unity and service. The day had proven that authentic human connection remained the foundation of effective royal duty, just as it had been for their predecessors throughout British history.